Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and it's my pleasure to have Dr. Molly Maloof with us. Dr. Molly provides health optimization and personalized medicine to high-achieving entrepreneurs, investors, and technology executives. For 3 years, she taught a pioneering course on healthspan in the wellness department of the medical school at Stanford University before launching her own company, inspired by her unique philosophy of health. Since 2012, she's worked as an advisor consultant to more than 50 companies in the digital health, consumer health, and biotechnology industries. Dr. Maloof is on the frontier of personalized medicine, digital health technologies, biofeedback, assisted lifestyle intervention, psychedelic medicine, and science-backed wellness products and services. Her new book is The Spark Factor, The Secret to Supercharging Energy, Becoming Resilient, and Feeling Better Than Ever. Molly, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited to talk to you today, and I think the best way to start off would be for our listener or viewer to understand a bit more about your origin story. How did you get into this? Like, did you have some traumatic experience or some sort of pivotal experience that brought you to health optimization and supercharging energy, or was that something that you just kind of fell into by
Oh,
accident?
well, I mean, it's like somebody once last weekend I was asking them about their background and they were like, "Do you want the 50 foot, 500 foot or 50,000 foot view?" And it was kind of a good way to answer because I've been on a health journey since I was a child. I wasn't a super healthy kid and I was, I had a traumatic birth. I had pneumonia as a child. I had tonsillitis. I had chronic sore throats, lots of antibiotics, developed all sorts of problems with gut health. And really, when I hit puberty was when I was just like, wow, someday I'm going to figure out how my body works. Someday I'm going to understand this, all these weird hormonal changes. And I dedicated my life to becoming a doctor as a young kid, as a fifth grader. So when you spend your whole life caring about health, it's like, when did it really begin? Well, I mean, I guess arguably my entire life I've been interested in this topic. I've always been interested in science. I started using supplements in high school. I started reading popular science and learning about modafinil and wondering, wow, wouldn't it be great to be able to take a drug that you couldn't sleep? Now, I don't actually like the drug modafinil, but I was fascinated by it and fascinated by the idea of um, using your mind to think through how could you change your body's functions and how could you really understand what's going on inside your body to make better decisions about your health. Then, I got to medical school and I was not thriving. I found it really challenging. And obviously, medical school is hard. But when you are getting like average grades and you feel like you're a lot smarter than that, it's a hard struggle. And I had really bad test anxiety. So I went to a psychologist and I was like, I think there's something wrong with my brain. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with your brain. You're not depressed. You're not anxious. You're just a stressed out medical student who's not taking care of herself. And as a result of that feedback, I was like, well, I guess it's up to me to take care of myself. So I started studying evidence based lifestyle medicine. I started looking at the science and the research and doing little changes. I started taking omega 3s. I started taking vitamin D, magnesium. I started doing yoga. I was very sedentary prior to that. I started to sleep normal hours, spend more time with my family and my friends, and I dramatically improved my grades. Like I started getting outstandings, and I went and took my second board exam, and I went from an average on my first board exam to a 99th percentile on my step two, and I didn't have any test anxiety left. And I noticed that I was just thriving, and everybody at my school was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I started, changing my lifestyle and focusing on optimizing my health." And they were like, "And it improved your performance?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So that's when I started really wondering why, like why did this work for me? And so I started creating a course called Physician Heal Thyself, Evidence-Based Lifestyle. And it was a course for other students at school to learn what I knew and to basically bring in teachers and, lecturers to share what they knew about optimizing health with my peers. And that was my first real taste of education. Ended up winning some humanitarian awards at my university. And, then I got to my residency and it was like a nightmare. And you realize that modern medicine is not really compatible with optimal health. And I decided that I would get my license and then start working in Silicon Valley and becoming a doctor to executives and basically working with lots of companies to figure out how to do product development, clinical research, scientific marketing, and just learning about how there was a way to, use technology to amplify and scale a lot of discoveries around health optimization. So I've been able to work with 50 companies in the last 10 years and just really dig into this whole space of optimizing health. And now we're here, I'm writing a book, and I'm trying to take everything I taught at Stanford. I used to teach a course at Stanford called Live Better Longer, Extending Health Span for Longer Lifespan. And that course was really all about how do you really break down health systematically and understand health from the mitochondrial theory of aging. And so that course has been sort of the backbone of the book I wrote. And now I'm in a whole new chapter trying to understand not just the basics of health and biology, but really understand the role of our psychology and our spirituality and our connection to others and love itself and how that plays a role in our health.
And how does that play a role in our health? I'm guessing at a superficial level, it's pretty obvious, but on the more ethereal or metaphysical level, there's profound impacts. Like it's been astounding these last few years on my spiritual journey,
Yeah.
how I can manifest my own reality in ways I
Right.
never thought possible.
I mean, I really think that a lot of the scientific paradigm we're working with is going to be really out of date in like the next 20 years. And partially because I feel like when you're on this hero's journey, and I've been on like 3 of them in this lifetime, so this is number 3. Um, there's a point in the hero's journey where you kind of like go from the normal world to the special world. And the special world is definitely the world of manifestation. It's about really getting the way I kind of translate it in science is like, how can you get all of your consciousness in your body in alignment with a vision that you want to create? And then you manifest that from clarity, right? Like that's really part of the secret. But love is, I don't know if you've read any of David Hawkins' work, but like
Yeah.
it's, there's actually like this belief in a lot of, and in the history of religion and spirituality, there's always been a belief that people can heal with love. Like there's always been this belief. And we haven't figured out how to do it scientifically. But I have seen, I saw miracles in the hospital that like all the doctors, we were all just like, what just happened? What was that thing? And I'll never forget this kid who had a really bad case of an ear infection that became bone infection, became close to his brain being infected. And we were all stunned that this kid had not been crying hysterically and was on no pain meds. We were just like, what is going on here? Like, this makes 0 sense. And because like most kids with an ear infection are crying. This kid had a bone infection and an ear infection. And so we're all sitting there like, what's going on? And I'm like, and I go to the mom and I'm like, so none of us can really understand why your child is doing so well because it's not fitting within any of what we normally do with children in the hospital. And she's like, oh, well, just so you know, I went to Mecca a few years ago and I saved some holy water and I'm pouring it in his ear every day. And I was like, okay, that's strange. And I was just like, well, I believe you. And so she was like, yeah, I mean, look at him. He's fine. So I'm not saying I like have all the answers to figure out how love heals, but I definitely think we need to study the science of this. I think we need to understand it in order to be able to harness it. And a really good example of how love heals is understanding the role of social connection in health. So it turns out that the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. And when you have really high quality, loving relationships, you live longer and healthier. And this is pretty well established in the literature, at least epidemiologically. Every single blue zones has the role of community in their health. And so if you look at the neurobiology of this, isolated animals and isolated humans have a much higher stress response. It raises cortisol. It increases it increases the APH axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It lowers vagal tone. It creates essentially the conditions where the body goes into a state of wanting to protect itself. Martin Picard would describe this as, or Robert Davio would describe this as the cell danger response. So when the body is under threat, it goes into a state of defense. And this is the opposite of when the body is in a state of calm and safety and connection to others. The body releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is an anti-inflammatory. It's an antioxidant. It's cardioprotective. It's mitoprotective. And when I saw this sort of dichotomy, I was like, whoa, what have we done during the pandemic to humanity? How have we missed something so important to healing and health? And also, why did we send these public health messages to shelter in place rather than shelter in place with a small cluster of people that you can feel safe with? A lot of people were isolating alone. A lot of elderly people were isolating alone, and a lot of young people were isolating alone. And I was alone for a few months during the pandemic, and I saw my mental health deteriorate very rapidly. So I got to the point where I was just like, oh my God, I need friends. So, in animal studies for depression, what they do is they isolate them and they put them under a lot of stress. And so it's not surprising that when you feel connected and you feel surrounded by people that you trust and people that you love, then you can be healthier. So there's obviously
Yeah,
different
and
types of
also
love.
your psychic abilities and your kind of metaphysical connection increases as well,
Yeah.
not just connection with others. So, as an example of a science backed study or a science uh, evidence based study, I guess, was the 100 monkeys thing in Indonesia. Do you know about this?
Tell me.
So there were all these monkeys in different islands separated from each other. But the monkeys on one island learned how to wash their sweet potato so it wouldn't be all gross and have all the dirt on it and everything. And once it got to the 100th monkey on that island, other monkeys on neighboring islands who were too far away to possibly get any information other than telepathically about this,
Whoa.
because they wouldn't be able to swim across the water, started washing their sweet potatoes as well.
I mean, this is the thing about scientific discoveries as well, is oftentimes people make similar discoveries around the same time. And this is why patents are so important in science, because there's a bunch of people studying the same topics. They're going to come up with ideas. It's funny, you often see companies, and that one idea will come out, and before you know it, there's 10 companies in the space. And so it's like, these discoveries come from? And it's it comes initially, I mean, almost all of reality is manifest in our mind first. So and that is the biggest challenge of being an innovator, is the self-doubt and the ideas in your mind that you have, that you I had this, very clear idea of what I wanted to build a few years ago when I was working for another company. And I just had so many people tell me, that's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's not going to work. And then eventually, when enough people do think it's possible, people start building it. But I was just really early to a movement. I was a pioneer in blood sugar monitoring. And I was just putting them on healthy people. And I was like, oh my God, everybody should be wearing these to understand their metabolism firsthand. But now I'm working in psychedelic medicine, and I'm sitting there I'm sitting here before the call trying to calm my mind and relax my mind so I can meditate a little bit before we get on the call. And I had a call before this as well. And I was just thinking this morning earlier, I'm the biggest challenge of being an entrepreneur is you're trying to create reality, but you're also trying to fight against the doubt that that's not going to manifest, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you win in that scenario?
I
How
mean,
do you beat the doubt? How do
I
you
think,
personally beat the doubt?
I think you have to create a reality distortion field. And I think reality distortion fields are kind of similar to what it's written about in books called M fields, where there's fields of ideas and thoughts that when enough people believe that that's supposed to be reality, starts to manifest. And so part of my gift is I can see things before they happen. I can see, oh, this totally needs to be a thing, but it's going to be a long time before that becomes a thing. And then you just have to try to get people to be sort of onboarded into your idea enough so that people start to want to invest in the idea, so that it becomes an idea that actually can manifest. And also, you have to recruit people to help you with the idea. You have to have enough people who can see it clearly so that it can become reality.
Yeah. So you mentioned psychedelic medicine. So what is
Yeah.
that? What is that to you? Is that something that is like plant medicine, like ayahuasca or DMT, or what does psychedelic medicine mean, and what are some therapeutic applications where you've seen some real breakthroughs?
Sure. I mean, so the way I kind of think about psychedelics today is there's a few different categories. So there's like the spiritual use of psychedelics for connecting to source. And then there's recreational psychedelics, which is oftentimes actually very therapeutic for people to take psychedelics in recreational context. It helps them connect to others. Then there's sort of the medical pharmaceutical complex, which is where I was just at a conference last week, and it's the application of psychedelics in order to heal dysfunction. But psychedelic medicine it's not just creating a drug and getting it approved. It's also creating a preparation, a, an actual drug experience, and then an integration of that transformation. So you can't just you could just hand people drugs, but you're not going to get the best benefit from them. You want to design drug assisted therapies. And I'm particularly interested in how do we give people agency and autonomy over their use of psychedelics in a way that they can use in the comfort of their own home. I'm particularly interested in psychedelic medicine for sexual dysfunction, because I was able to accidentally heal from sexual dysfunction with a partner, using MDMA. Now, I think we're pretty far away from the FDA letting people take home MDMA to use, because it is a really powerful drug. But I would argue that like there are going to be shorter acting, safer versions of these medicines available, and we're going to continue to see all sorts of conditions treated with them, including things like autism, and including things like, um, you know, like like treatment resistant depression, and all sorts of other conditions. But I would argue that we need to figure out where is the line of what should be in a clinic and then what can be taken home. And I think there's this assumption right now that all psychedelics are dangerous, and like nobody has safety. Like there's no such thing as safe use at home of psychedelics. But I really think that people are already prescribing ketamine for home use, and it seems to be going pretty well for these companies. There's a lot of controversy around it. Cannabis is already being used in the home. It's a psychedelic. So I'm still kind of bullish that there's going to be a way to give people psychedelics for home use. And I also just don't think that you should have to take a psychedelic that's meant for sexual function. I don't think you should have to take that in an office. I think that's weird. I think it's a strange concept that like you would have to take a drug in a sex therapist's office and talk about your sexual dysfunction that way. That just the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I wouldn't want to go do that therapy. I don't want to go to a clinic and talk about sex under the influence of drugs. I want to be with my partner. I want to connect with them. And I think that it's certainly a long shot, but if it works, Viagra is the best selling drug of all time. So, I think women deserve something that can help them connect with their partners and feel more heart opened. And also alongside that, learn how to use medicine in the context of understanding the biggest drivers of their dysfunction.
Mhm. Amazing. So, what was your first experience with psychedelics that was transformative for you?
I'd say the first time I used mushrooms was somewhere in my early 20s. And I went to a festival, and it definitely became a lot more than a festival because I was laying under a tree for at least 4 hours, and I was in a total trance, connected to God and connected to, divinity. And it was just absolute majesty of hallucinations and just completely speechless mystical experience. I don't think I've ever taken that much mushrooms ever since then, by the way. Like I've never taken that much again. It was a profound mystical experience, but sometimes you have experiences like that where you're like, yeah, I totally got the message. Like I got the message, and the message was like these medicines are powerful teachers, and they can really open up our eyes to what's possible for humanity. And they're very much like they're very useful. They obviously have risks associated with them, but I've never had a really bad trip. I've always been really careful with dosing, with sourcing, and they're becoming very. I mean, it's certainly controversial for me to even be talking about them, but there's so much science coming out about them. There's so many people studying them that I think it's important for people to just know that there is a safe way to use them for transformation. But it's important to realize that they enhance like your own inner work. They don't do the work for you. You still have to do the work. They just teach you that there's parts of your mind that you haven't been able to access or even see. And I think they can really transform your ability to manifest, your ability to actually see the world differently. I mean, for me, it created lasting openness in my personality. I was fairly neurotic and uptight before I did mushrooms, and since that one experience, I think it did permanently change my level of openness and my level of just open mindedness. Like I was so much more closed minded, so much more. I just believed that I believed what I believed, and that was that. And ever since that experience, I'd say that the more I learn, the less I know, and the more that I want to learn. And so that was a pretty profound shift in my personality, and that's been well documented in the scientific literature that mushrooms can certainly transform your personality in that way, specifically shifting from neuroticism to openness.
But what would you tell someone who's a skeptic and is arguing that these are just synapses firing all crazy because you took some psychedelics? This is not a connection to God or any higher power. These are just random synapses firing. So
Sure.
how do you uh, come back to them with something that's evidence based that might persuade them differently?
Um, there's a really good paper. Basically, the paper is psychedelics as potential catalysts of scientific creativity and insight. Now, the paper has the word potential in it, so it's not like it's been fully validated. But this paper is by Sam Gandy. It was in Drug Science, and it has this really amazing table in it, basically describing that, like, essentially dream states, hypnagogic states, which is like the state between dream and wake, and then psychedelic states all have something in common in that they have been used by scientists to enhance creativity and discovery and create discoveries. So, a lot of really interesting scientific discoveries have been made in these states of consciousness expansion. So, obviously, nobody can really prove the existence of God per se, but I personally believe that it takes just as much faith to be an atheist as it does to believe in God,
Mm-hmm.
because you actually have to have faith that you're right, and you can't really prove that you are. And so there's no provability to atheism. There's no provability to believing in God. So both of them require faith. And so I would just use their same argument against them on that one. But I would say that in terms of how we can use our minds, I do think that there's the possibility of using these medicines to catalyze creative insights. And I mean, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, like these guys, like both very much publicly state that psychedelics have played a role in their ability to come up with new ideas, and like that's pretty profound. And so these are two of the best entrepreneurs of our time. That's pretty fascinating. I mean, Carrie Mullis discovered PCR while he was on psychedelics, and so I just think there's a lot to be said about the potential of these things, and I think we're gonna look back probably we're probably gonna like look back and we're gonna realize how stupid we sounded in 50 years. And we're just gonna look back at this time and be like, wow, look at the rudimentary tools we had. And the world will look so much more precise, so much more, well, so much more science. And remember, there was a major impediment to science in the last 50 years because of the scheduling of these medicines by the DEA, sometimes even illegally. The DEA scheduled MDMA in a way that was actually illegal, but they got away with it because the DEA is really powerful bureaucracy. So MDMA is about to be rescheduled. It's about to be approved for PTSD. So I would definitely say that like we're on the cusp of a new revolution, but there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to believe it. And these are the people who are going to be the late adopters. But then there's also a lot of people who do believe it. And the people who are true believers are people who've had their lives transformed on accident often. One of my investors, he took psilocybin once in high school, and he was very depressed. And I do believe he might have even said he was suicidal at one point. And he took mushrooms, and it completely transformed his depression. And he's now one of the biggest investors in the space. For me, it was the transformation of my sexual function on accident with MDMA, with a partner where I felt safe. And it was the reprogramming of my sexual memories that went from unsafe to safe. And I was like, wow, my nervous system is now different. And this is pretty cool. So, yeah, I definitely think that there's certainly going to be a lot of people who are not going to believe this stuff. But I think with more science, we'll be able to actually demonstrate that this has potential.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to know that there's not just a placebo effect, there's a nocebo effect. So you
Yep.
can undo the good benefits of a medicine or some sort of
Yep.
modality by not believing in it.
Yep. I mean, you can literally go to a doctor, have him prescribe something for you, but you just didn't believe the doctor and you take the drug and it doesn't work as well. You can go to the doctor, believe the drug is going to work, and it actually works better. Like, so there's been a lot of, I've been really interested in the placebo response because there's been a lot of great placebo literature out there. And the theory is that the placebo is actually not just the placebo itself, but it's the entire experience around the placebo that creates the conditions for healing. So it's like the actual use of a placebo with the expectation of an effect. So this is your brain's inner healer turned on, and your brain has a capacity to release oxytocin when it feels like it is going to actually have a healing experience. And often it is actually the experience of connection to a physician or another healthcare provider and taking a medicine that actually enhances the medicine's outcome. So like there was a study that was done where they were giving people anti-lipid medicine, anti-cholesterol medicine, like statins, and then they gave them a placebo alongside it. And the statins worked on their own, but the statins worked better with a placebo added, which was fascinating. So you can even make drugs work better by adding a placebo on top of them.
Hmm. I bet if they studied the healthcare worker blessing the statin before giving it to them, that it would have additional benefits as well, just like the placebo effect, but transforms or transmutes the medicine to make it even more effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, wild stuff. So why did you call your book The Spark Factor?
Well, I'm really interested in mitochondria, and interestingly, like when the sperm meets the egg, there actually is a spark of life. There's a zinc spark that happens. It's a chemical reaction, but there's also mitochondria from the mother egg that turn on and start producing energy in that cell in order to produce cell division, in order to actually produce life. So life is energy, hands down. If you don't have those mitochondria in that cell, there's no way for the sperm and the egg to work. Like you can have DNA in the cells, but if you don't have mitochondria in that cell, there's no way the life will emerge. And so when you really look at that, you're like, okay, energy is life, period. Yes, of course, the architectural plans matter, but without energy to transcribe those plans into proteins and to turn it into more cells, you don't get another human. You don't get a human. So that's one of the first things that I discovered is like, this endosymbiotic hypothesis is also worth talking about because we evolved from single cell organisms a long time ago. Whether some people don't believe that, but I do. And so we came out of the primordial soup, and part of what actually transformed existence is the ability to gather energy from the environment. So when the single cellular organisms, they harness the power of bacteria to actually create energy, create more energy than they could themselves, they actually enhanced evolution. And so if you look at a lot of evolution as humans have gone forth from, single cell organisms to the ocean to whatever crawled out to like mammals to where we are today as humans, human evolution has been greatly aided by the ability to gather energy and resources. So energy is life. It's kind of core to existence. The biological imperative is like something I'm really passionate about. I'm kind of like an accidental organismal biologist. And so I'm really interested in the interplay between energy and structure. So without resources, we do not create more people. And we have this imperative to gather food. We breathe air that goes into our cells. It goes into the mitochondria. Mitochondria burn the substrate and turn it into electrons. The electrons run down the electron transport chain, powers a hydrogen turbine, creates an electrochemical gradient, and creates a differential charge between two membranes. So you get both a battery and a capacitor in the cell. So I love physics. I'm really interested in how, like physics is really the science of existence itself and truth. So I've always been really like fundamental, like driven through like first principles thinking. And in that, I'm like, okay, so if like metabolism is really darn important to human existence and health, then it makes sense that when we break our metabolism, we get sick. And so a big part of the book is about metabolism. It's about how, the vast majority of chronic diseases are metabolic by nature. So you have heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and dementia. All of these are characterized by metabolic dysfunction. And I believe that, it's mitochondrial health that really drives overall capacity to maintain the integrity of the structure.
And gut
So
health
the
has
modern,
a large part to do with mitochondrial health, correct?
what were you saying?
And gut health has a large part to do with mitochondrial health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of mitochondrial microbiome crosstalk. And on top of that, there's a lot of microbiome mind crosstalk because your vagus nerve goes directly through your body into your gut. So if you have gut dysfunction, you're going to be getting alarm signals throughout the body. Your mitochondria are going to be sending signals to the brain saying something's wrong. And inflammation, systemic inflammation, is the result of dysbiosis and leaky gut. Like you get it from the gut, you get it from the mouth, the gut, and anywhere else that there's imbalances in bacteria. So like you really gotta mind the energy production systems, and that starts with chewing your food, swallowing your food, digesting your food from a relaxed place, assimilating your food, and then powering those mitochondria to produce energy. And a lot of what damages this whole system is how we feed ourselves. So the food that we eat is often breaking the engines of the cells. It breaks the power. It breaks the power plants. It damages the microbiome, and it causes, mitochondrial. What they would call. It's almost like a traffic jam when you eat this really high fat, high sugar foods in these packaged processed foods, and in fast food, you don't get nutrient density, and so you get all of this energy going through the cell, but you don't have enough vitamins and minerals to actually run metabolism properly. So stuff starts to break down and you start getting wrenches thrown into the Krebs cycle. and then you just don't have proper energy flow. And so I spent most of my early career focused on metabolism because it's a really good starting point for optimizing health. And then once you've kind of mastered metabolism, you start asking yourself, well, what else is there, right? And you realize that well, first of all, there's like a massive interplay between metabolism and like movement. So if you think about your body like a car, you need gas in the tank to run the car, but you actually need to run the car because you don't want to sit a car in a garage all day long because you're going to get exhaust. And exhaust is going to damage that car and damage whoever's in that car. So the same thing happens in your body when you eat lots of food and you sit around all day long. You actually get exhaust fumes in your cells, especially when you get these big blood sugar spikes from high sugar foods. You get these blood sugar spikes that are like exhaust. It's like oxidative stress in the blood vessels, damages the lining of the blood vessels, and actually can contribute to hypertension and heart disease because you have to repair that
Thus,
lining of the blood.
that's your recommendation of getting everyone to use these blood sugar monitors, not just people who
Yeah.
have diabetes.
Yes. Because before you have diabetes and prediabetes, there's patterns in your blood sugar that you can see. And your blood sugar is a direct reflection of your what's called homeostatic capacity. And capacity is a really important word in this book. Energy capacity, homeostatic capacity, capacity itself, because these mitochondria are little capacitors. They're little organelles that carry charge, and you need to be able to deploy that charge in order to do work, right? Like any kind of work, whether it's running around, chasing your kids, looking at your computer, like processing information, you need energy to do work. And you also need to move your body to send a signal to the cell to make more mitochondria so you have enough engines to do the work. So the thing about the body is that if you don't move it enough, then your body starts making less mitochondria. And this is called the adaptive capacity model. Your body's always adapting to the world around you, and you will have lower capacity because your body will say, well, if I'm not moving all day long, then why should I have all these mitochondria sitting around? That's a silly waste of energy. Your body's always trying to predict the future. So by exercising, you're sending the signal to those cells that you need to make more energy because you may need more tomorrow. Because today you sent a signal that you needed more to do this work. So it's so important not to overlook the role of movement, weightlifting, cardio, flexibility exercises. It's just so important for aging, not to get frail and to keep those muscles strong and to keep those bones strong. And that happens when you're young. You can't really wait till you're old and have osteoporosis to fix your bones. You got to keep them strong when you're young. But what a lot of women don't realize is that a lot of women athletes and a lot of women who undereat, they're actually damaging their bones, and they're stopping their periods, and they're actually leading to, like you're going to get estrogen deficiency if you don't have your period. And so a lot of women have made this mistake that skinny is beautiful and that under eating is health is like makes a, is good. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for calorie restriction. But, a lot of what the book talks about in terms of women is like, you have to know how to biohack your body as you age in different phases of your life, because someone who's young, fit, healthy, and fertile has different biological imperatives than someone who's menopausal. Like your body has a different role, have a different goal. But as you get older, it's all about, maintaining the body, but not having the body overgrow. You don't want to continue gaining weight pound after pound, year after year as you get older. When you're young, you have a fairly fast metabolism, and you also have really good blood sugar metabolism typically. And so you can eat those carbs, and you can exercise, you can burn them effectively, and you often don't need to do as much fasting if you're fit and you're actually working out and you're using that energy to burn through. But as we get older, our metabolism shifts a bit. We become less insulin sensitive. To put it quite frankly, our pancreas slowly wears out over the course of our life. And some people get diabetes when they get old just because they've worn out their pancreas. It doesn't have to happen, but we have to maintain organ reserve. So organ reserve is like your organs' capacity to function. And so if you drink a lot throughout your life, you're wearing down your liver's organ reserve. If you overeat and you have liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver, you're wearing down your liver's organ reserve. If you, if you abuse drugs like ketamine, for example, you're wearing down your kidney and bladder organ reserve. If you, if you eat the wrong foods and you wear out your mitochondria and you like really tax your pancreas and you pump out way too much insulin over years after years after years, eventually your pancreas is going to lose its organ reserve. So, if you don't use your heart properly and you don't really exercise your heart, then, like as you get older, you may end up with a weak heart and your heart's reserve may decline. So, there's a lot you really got to think about your body long term, and you got to think about how do you maintain these organs and how do you optimize your body to help it heal over time.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago about estrogen deficiency if you don't get your period. So that would be not just for for women who are going through menopause or have passed menopause, but
Yeah.
also for women who don't get their period ever. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if
Well,
you've done any
some
analysis on this or have any
it's not.
advice
I
on
mean,
that.
if you're on an IUD, then we're not talking about you because you've stopped your period because you've stopped, um, shedding the lining of your uterus. But I'm specifically talking about relative energy deficiency of sport and the female athlete triad and anorexia and women who just don't eat enough and they don't have enough body fat on their body. Obviously, this percentage of women is a lot lower than the percentage of women who have estrogen dominance. So there's a lot more women out there who just are carrying extra weight and body fat and are producing too much estrogen and are suffering the consequences of over having like menorrhagia, heavy periods. Like I gained 10 pounds during the pandemic and I developed estrogen dominance. I had, my breast grew a cup size, my body grew a size, and I started getting heavier periods, and I was bleeding a lot, and it was because I was producing too much estrogen. So women's bodies are, challenging to regulate because we have these hormonal shifts throughout the month. But it's safe to say if you're having too heavy of a period or not having a period at all, then there's something wrong with your hormones. And so you got to get help with that. Problem is most mainstream doctors actually don't really know what to do aside from putting people on birth control to regulate their period. But that's not regulating your period. That's just covering it up. Like that's just giving you synthetic hormones so that you can not have to think about the symptoms. As someone who's certainly struggled with her share of hormone imbalance, it's taken me a long time and a lot of biohacking to get my body into better balance.
Mhm.
And I would highly recommend going to a functional medicine doctor who's done hormone training to learn how to optimize these systems because it's not as easy as just reading a book and figuring it out. You actually got to run labs and you need to identify what is your problem firsthand because it could be all sorts of different causes.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Are there any?
But that being said, I'm not like anti-estrogen, by the way, and I'm certainly not going to tell someone to go off birth control if they like need to be on it. I'm not on birth control. I'm a big fan of natural cycles and the Aura Ring. But when I go through menopause as I get older, I'm definitely going to be taking hormones because I'm not going to. I have a bigger. I mean, I certainly I have my own familial risks, but there's going to be so many ways to predict cancer as we get older that I'm way less concerned about cancer than I am about getting dementia or heart disease.
Are there any particular functional medicine doctors that you recommend for uh, like getting hormone help or fertility help or anything like that?
I mean, certainly Sarah Gottfried's work is worth following. I mean, she's such a great doctor that I'm sure she's hard to get into, but she's exceptional. And then there's the Institute of Functional Medicine has a physician directory that you can search and you can see if hormones are their specialty on that search, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
So you can just like find one in your area. Ideally, you want somebody you can meet in person.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier uh, neurotropic, modafinil, but you didn't really get a lot of value out of that personally. Are there neurotropics that you take? And tell us
Oh,
more about that, if so.
Yeah. I mean, a really great example is GABA for anxiety. It's a great anti-anxiety nootropic. Theanine is also great if you get anxious. Um, and I also, have dabbled with all sorts of different nootropics. Like those are the two ones I'm playing with a lot right now. There's a company called Biooptimizers, and they have a very high-end nootropics product called nootropics line called Nootopia. I'm a big fan of lion's mane.
Hmm.
Like I love lion's mane. I take acetylcholine for memory. Lion's mane and acetylcholine are good for neuroplasticity, and I've definitely taken tryptophan and 5-HTP in the past for mood. Um, Tryptophan's great for sleep. I would argue melatonin's almost a nootropic in some ways because it helps put you to sleep. It works on the mind. Um, and then what are some other ones that I've tried? I used to take Huperzine A. I think I might retry it again. It's kind of a good one as well. I believe it's an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. And I'm trying to think of what else is out there that's good. Phosphatidylserine is a good one, especially for high cortisol levels. So I'm taking that one right now in the mornings. I'm currently taking because of this one SNP that I have called COMT. It's like heterozygous mutated. I like SAMe a lot for just overall mood and regulation. So those would be my top ones. I'd say that's a lot. I don't take them
Yeah,
all
it
at
is a
once. I'm
lot.
mostly taking
Awesome.
SAMe and taking citicoline pretty much daily, and then I'm like I have like a whole nootropics and herb station that's like things that I throw into smoothies. That's like it's kind of like a little smoothie station. So I've like always kind of experimenting with different powders and different substances to see what I can do to optimize my health.
Oh, that's awesome. And how about sleep? What are you doing to optimize your sleep other than tryptophan?
I don't take tryptophan for my sleep anymore.
Okay.
So I've hacked my sleep for years, and it started with first and foremost circadian rhythms, like really, 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 really honing in on like I go to bed at this time, I wake up at this time, and the only things that throw me off are when I like have a particularly fun weekend. And then basically what you have is jet lag for days. When you like go to bed at a different time, you're basically giving your brain jet lag. So like circadian rhythms, sunlight in the morning, um, and making sure that you have a really dark room at night. I use an eye mask. I have a really comfortable bed. I got like, a mattress topper, and I have an air purifier in my room. Air quality is really key for sleep. That's something a lot of people can overlook. Um, I like the app Sleep Space. If you haven't tried it, it's a good app. It's really well
Hmm.
done.
Okay.
And then I wake up to an alarm called iChi, and it's like I-XI, and it's like an app that wakes you up with a golden ratio instead of like a blasting alarm. And it's a way more comfortable to wake up to like gongs and like singing bowls than it is to wake up to beep, beep, beep. Like I don't really like that sound.
Yeah.
I don't want that in my morning. That's just going to cause me more stress. Um, and then before I wake up in the morning and as I fall asleep at night, I've got about 30 minutes of each day really using that hypnagogic space to think about what I want to manifest in my life. Think about what I want to create. Think about what I want. How do I get my brain centered? How do I get my dreams, aligned with my with whatever I want to be thinking about, whatever I want to bring into my life.
Hmm.
So that's really key. Is like looking at those two spaces as very prime spaces for manifestation.
Yeah. And is there a particular prayer that you really like that you want to share with our listeners?
I mean, I love loving kindness meditations.
Hmm.
If I'm feeling anxious, I'll do, I'm filled with loving kindness, and I'll use affirmations. Like, even though I'm anxious right now, I know that I'm going to have a great day. Or like, if I'm stressed out about this thing, and you're just tapping your tapping points,
Yeah.
and you use this to just like really get your acupressure points to to get those emotions like out of your body. You want to get them moving. I love emotional freedom technique. It's a great technique. And just like
It's
using affirmations to just move the energy.
it's so powerful. I had some incredible experiences with emotional freedom technique, tapping. Fred Gallo was a guest on this podcast, and he's an expert in that area. He worked with me for 45 minutes, and I was able to go into an ultralight. I had extreme fear of heights, but I went in an ultralight or microlight, which is essentially a hang glider with a motor attached and a pilot, of course. And we went
Wow.
above the mist in Victoria Falls, and I was able to do that. There was no way I was ever going to do that without that session with Fred.
Wow. So you did that right
Yeah,
before?
right after he was there on the trip to Zambia. It was a Tony Robbins Platinum Partner trip.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
So wait, you went from
Yeah,
you did the session
I was
beforehand
there
or
as
after?
part of a group of Tony Robbins Platinum Partners, and Tony had arranged for Fred to be there to work with us to help us to overcome our fears, so that we'd be willing to go in canoes in the Zambezi River, which was full of crocodiles and hippos, super dangerous,
Whoa.
and to do like the microlight, ultralight rides and that sort of stuff. Yeah, and it worked. It really worked. So I had to have him on my podcast to talk about it. That was awesome. Are you into sacred geometry?
Sure.
So what's your favorite symbol and why?
Oh, favorite symbol. I mean, that's challenging. Um, yeah, I mean, I never really thought about that question. It's kind of an interesting question to have. Um, in my experience, like when I think of sacred geometry, I just think of all the visions that come to you during a psychedelic experience. And so,
All right.
my perspective on like patterns is like it's not even just like a two-dimensional thing. It's like a little literal like three-dimensional like five-dimensional experience. So like how can I translate that for a
Mm-hmm.
podcast? It's almost impossible. Um, but yeah, I've had like profoundly visual experiences on psychedelics that have been so transcendent that I have felt like I could connect to people through this space of like being in that space, being in that like sort of divine connection to source. You felt I just felt so deeply connected to others while I was visualizing the ability to connect with them through this experience. So yeah, it's like really hard to translate psychedelics on a podcast. But I'd say that like to me, like things that are in the sort of physical two-dimensional, three-dimensional space just don't even come close to comparing to what you can see on a like a on a psychedelic. Like it's just a different, totally different ball game. I mean, I
Yeah,
love
no,
like
I
the
get it.
art
I
of
get it. I've
Android.
never done any.
I love the art of Android Jones. I love the art of Alex Gray, and then like there's a lot of new technologies coming out, like Entheo Digital and the Lucia Light, where you can use light and sound to induce a psychedelic experience without any drugs at all. And so I'm fascinated by like all of these possibilities.
I had a psychedelic experience without drugs, just by getting touched on the head by a monk in India.
Wow. What happened?
Yeah, I I went from agnostic to connected to God, and miracles started happening one after
Oh my
another after
God.
another.
Seriously?
It was amazing. Yeah, yeah. That was in 2012.
I mean,
Changed my life.
that is one of the coolest stories I've ever heard. That's incredible. So basically, there was your life before and after that experience. Do you think he touched you on
Yeah.
purpose in that way? Do you think there was something that he meant to give you? Was there
Oh
a
yeah. It
conversation?
was. He was in a super state of consciousness. So when he touched me, it's called a oneness blessing or a diksha. He passed a lot of divine grace into me, and it's like it jump started me, and I saw everything in Technicolor, like a cartoon. It was the most vibrant colors, greens, and everything that I've
Wow.
ever seen in my life. It was so
That
cool.
is amazing.
Yeah,
That is brilliant. I love that. So cool.
yeah. All right. Well, I know we're out of time. So again, what's your book, and how do folks learn more from you other than getting your book on
Yeah.
Amazon?
I'm pretty active on Instagram at drmolly.co. I have a lot of stories and a lot more reels are going to be coming out. And then you can find me on Twitter at Molly Maloof MD, LinkedIn, um, and my website, www.drmolly.co. And so there's going to be a lot of extras on the website. I'm actually designing like a favorite products page because everyone's always asking me what do you use, and biohackers always have a million biohacking products. So there's that. So that's coming, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Molly. This was fabulous, and you're really an inspiration to many, and I'm sure our listeners are going to get a ton out of this episode. So thank you so much for your generosity.
Thanks, Stephan.
All right. Well, thank you, listener, and get out there and fill the world with light and love, and we'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.